June 1944, 4:15 a.m., Southwick House near Portsmouth, England. Dwight D. Eisenhower is awake and dressed, moving through the corridors of his headquarters as staff officers gather maps, weather charts, and the latest reports from the ports. Outside, thousands of men are already committed to motion, loading equipment, checking weapons, climbing into landing craft, whether the final order comes or not. Eisenhower is not watching a plan on paper anymore. He is watching the edge of a real operation, one that cannot be paused once it begins. For weeks, he has carried the combined pressure of politics, strategy, and human lives. The invasion, Operation Overlord, has been assembled from every corner of the Allied effort. American, British, Canadian, and Free French forces built into a single striking machine aimed at France. The plan demands a rare mix of conditions: darkness for airborne landings, a low tide for obstacles to be seen, enough light for navigation, and seas calm enough for landing craft to stay together. Most of all, it requires surprise and momentum. Delay too long and the Germans strengthen their defenses. Rush too early and the weather tears the assault apart before it reaches the beaches. Eisenhower's leadership style is measured and direct, but the reality is brutal. He is a general who has never commanded troops in combat before this war, now responsible for the largest amphibious invasion ever attempted. He listens more than he speaks. He lets experts argue. Then he decides. That is his job, and it is also his burden. He understands that if Overlord fails, the Allies may not get another chance in 1944. Ships will be damaged, men will be dead or captured, and the Germans will learn exactly how the Allies intend to attack. The cost of a failed first blow would echo for months, maybe longer. One of the central problems is that the invasion is not just a battlefield event, it is a logistical trapdoor. More than 5,000 ships and landing craft are involved, and tens of thousands of vehicles must follow across the channel. Once the fleet sails, it cannot simply circle and wait. Fuel, tides, and timing turn the operation into a narrow corridor. The planning is detailed, but the execution will depend on imperfect signals, exhausted men, and the physical reality of water, sand, and steel under fire. Eisenhower knows that no rehearsal can replicate that. He meets with his senior commanders and listens to each assessment. Bernard Montgomery insists on the necessity of striking hard and keeping the plan aggressive. Montgomery's confidence is useful, but it can also harden into certainty, and certainty is dangerous when the weather is unstable and the enemy still holds the ground. Eisenhower weighs what Montgomery wants against what the operation can physically sustain. He cannot afford optimism disguised as analysis. At the same time, he is aware of what the Germans believe. Adolf Hitler's command system is rigid and centralized, forcing major armored decisions upward rather than leaving them to local commanders. That structure can delay reactions, but it can also produce unpredictable interference. Eisenhower cannot count on German confusion as a strategy. He must assume competence and prepare for resistance strong enough to break the invasion in the first hours. A quiet reality sits behind every conversation. The men in landing craft will not hear the reasons for any decision. They will only experience the consequences. Eisenhower understands that command is not just directing forces, it is accepting that other people will pay the price for your judgment. He has already drafted a short failure message in case the landings are thrown back, and he has not shown it to anyone. It is a private act of responsibility, written before the outcome is known. As dawn approaches, the final decision compresses into a handful of hours. The last checks continue. The ports remain crowded. The aircraft are staged. The invasion is sitting on the edge of execution, balanced on conditions that cannot be controlled. If Dwight D. Eisenhower delays the invasion again, can he still keep the entire Allied force intact and the Germans uncertain long enough to strike? Inside the headquarters briefing room, Eisenhower sits at the center of a table that has become the nerve center of the invasion. The air is crowded with cigarette smoke and fatigue, but the discussion is not abstract. The weather charts in front of them will decide whether landing craft reach the beaches in formation or smash into each other in darkness and surf. James Stagg, the British meteorologist responsible for advising the Supreme Commander, does not control the weather. He controls whether the men in the room understand it. His forecasts are based on scattered Atlantic data, imperfect reports, and a storm system moving toward the channel. Many officers around him want a simple answer. The reality is that there is no perfect day coming, only days that are less dangerous than others. Stagg's value is not certainty. It is discipline, refusing to pretend that nature will cooperate with military planning. The immediate problem is that the invasion has already been delayed once. The original date of June 5th has slipped under the weight of wind, cloud cover, and sea conditions that would make airborne drops chaotic and naval gunfire less accurate. Postponing again is possible, but it is not free. Every delay increases the chance that the Germans notice unusual shipping patterns, tightened radio silence, and troop movements near the coast. Even if German intelligence cannot see the exact target, they will know something is approaching. Secrecy is a wasting asset. Eisenhower understands that once the enemy expects action, they prepare differently, and the cost of surprise is paid in blood. Montgomery argues for keeping the offensive spirit intact. His view is clear. Hesitation invites disorder. He believes the troops are ready and that the plan must be executed with force and commitment. Eisenhower hears him, but he also knows that Montgomery's confidence rests on an assumption that men can adapt under fire faster than equipment can endure. Landing craft cannot negotiate high seas with heavy loads and scattered navigation. If the first waves arrive broken and late, German defenders are given time to react and concentrate fire. In amphibious warfare, small failures compound fast. Stagg's updated assessment offers a narrow opening. A break in the weather may appear on June 6th, still rough, still risky, but potentially workable. It is not a promise of clear skies, it is a chance for operation. For airborne forces, cloud cover could scatter parachute drops and cause units to land miles from their objectives. For naval forces, rough seas could swamp smaller craft and delay engineers tasked with clearing obstacles. For the men who will hit the beaches first, it means confusion before the first shot is fired. This is where Eisenhower's decision becomes more than strategy. It becomes management of irreversible movement. Ships already crowded with troops cannot remain at sea indefinitely. Men packed below decks grow seasick, dehydrated, and exhausted before reaching combat. Equipment breaks down. Coordination suffers. The longer the armada waits, the more it consumes itself. Eisenhower is forced to weigh two different forms of danger: the danger of attacking into a storm and the danger of holding an invasion force in a fragile state while time and secrecy erode. The final conferences in the early hours of June 5th turn into a narrowing funnel. Eisenhower listens to Stagg again. He listens to the naval commanders who understand what waves can do to landing schedules. He listens to Montgomery. He also considers what the Germans might do if the Allies hesitate. In Hitler's system, reaction is often slow unless the threat is undeniable. But if the invasion becomes obvious and delayed, the Germans can shift units, reinforce coastlines, and prepare reserves. Eisenhower cannot allow the enemy to adjust to his timetable. He steps away from the table and then returns. The people around him can see the strain, not as panic, but as concentration. This is not fear of being wrong in history books. It is fear of being wrong while tens of thousands of men are trapped inside that wrong decision. The operational reality is now brutal and simple. Either the invasion goes in marginal conditions, or it does not go at all for an unknown length of time. Eisenhower looks at the forecasts, absorbs the lack of guarantees, and prepares to commit. What if James Stagg's forecast is wrong, and Eisenhower orders the landings into weather that breaks the assault before it reaches France? The final approval is given, and the machinery of invasion begins to move as a single mass. Eisenhower's signature does not fire a weapon, but it releases an entire force from waiting into action. Orders move down through staff sections, radios, and dispatch riders. Ships begin to leave their anchorages. Landing craft are pulled into position. Men climb aboard with heavy packs, rifles, demolition charges, and the knowledge that there will be no return to the English coast until the outcome is decided. The first large movements happen in darkness. Thousands of airborne troops are loaded into transport aircraft. Crews check fuel and navigation routes, knowing that cloud cover and anti-aircraft fire can scatter formations. The airborne plan depends on timing and surprise. Drop zones must be reached within minutes of schedule. Bridges, road junctions, and causeways must be seized before German units can organize. If these tasks fail, the beach landings face stronger resistance and slower movement inland. Eisenhower knows this is the fragile part of the operation. It is also the part he cannot correct once it starts. As the fleet crosses the channel, The physical scale of overlord becomes its own risk. Ships must maintain lanes through mines, coordinate with escorts, and hold formation in reduced visibility. Even a small number of collisions or groundings can disrupt schedules. The naval gunfire plan is tied to clocks, tides, and marked targets. If the sea causes delays, the opening bombardment may lift too early or too late, leaving assault troops exposed without full support. The invasion is designed as a combined system. Any break in timing forces men to improvise under fire. Across the water, German defenses are waiting, but German command is divided by assumptions. Erwin Rommel, responsible for Army Group B and the Atlantic Wall defenses in his sector, believes the invasion will be decided at the shoreline. His experience in North Africa has taught him that Allied air power makes daylight movement deadly. He argues that armor must be held close to the coast, ready to strike immediately before the Allies can build up strength. Rommel pushes for more mines, more obstacles, and more rapid decision-making. He wants the defenders to crush the landings in the first hours, before the beaches become supply ports. Adolf Hitler sees the situation differently. He holds the authority to release key armored reserves, and his instinct is to control the decisive moment himself. That instinct creates delay. German commanders in the field do not have the freedom to commit the strongest units instantly. They must interpret, request, wait, and confirm. It is a system built on hierarchy rather than speed. That structure does not guarantee failure, but it forces the defenders to fight the first hours with what is already in position. The Germans also face deception. Allied planners have fed intelligence channels with misleading signals pointing to Pas-de-Calais as the main invasion site. German leadership has reasons to expect that attack route because it is shorter across the channel and appears tactically logical. Even if Normandy is struck first, some German leaders may believe it is a diversion. That belief matters. It changes where reinforcements move and how long local commanders must hold alone. In an invasion, time is everything. The Allies need time to build strength. The Germans need time to deny it. Every hour becomes a contest of interpretation as much as firepower. Eisenhower's decision now becomes a reality inside the assault waves. The men packed into landing craft are not thinking about broad strategy. They are trying to keep equipment dry, manage seasickness, and remain functional for the moment the ramps drop. The sea remains rough. Troops tighten straps, adjust weapons, and try to remember the briefings they received on beaches they have never seen. Many have been trained intensely, but training does not remove fear. It only gives people something to do while afraid. As the fleet closes on France, the Allied plan relies on a sharp sequence: airborne landings, naval bombardment, and infantry assault synchronized into one blow. The Germans are about to test that sequence with machine guns, artillery, and prepared positions. Eisenhower has already done the only part of the battle that belongs purely to him. Now the outcome will be decided by thousands of separate actions, some coordinated, many improvised. If Adolf Hitler releases the armored reserves immediately, can Eisenhower's landing force still secure the beaches before the invasion is pushed back into the sea? The first assault waves reach the French coast with the plan already under stress. Sea conditions scatter landing craft, and some units arrive off target late or bunched together. Naval gunfire and aerial bombing have hit parts of the coastline, but the German defenses are not uniformly destroyed. In several sectors, machine gun positions and artillery remain intact, waiting for the moment the ramps drop. At Omaha Beach, the landing becomes the most dangerous test of the entire operation. The troops coming ashore face steep bluffs, prepared firing positions, and obstacles that force men into exposed lanes. Many amphibious tanks launched offshore founder in the rough water and sink before they can support the infantry. Engineers tasked with clearing gaps through obstacles are hit early, reducing the number of safe exits off the sand. The result is immediate congestion, wounded men, trapped units, and equipment piling up in a narrow strip under fire. Command and control collapses into small groups led by whoever is still standing. The historian's view of Omaha is not mystery. The plan depended on precise timing, workable sea conditions, and enough supporting fire to suppress defenders at the critical minute. When those assumptions fail, the beach turns into a problem the plan cannot solve quickly. The German defenders do not need to defeat the entire invasion. They only need to stop the first waves long enough to break momentum. Every minute pinned on the sand makes the next wave arrive into the same killing zone. Yet the landing does not collapse because the men on the beach adapt. Small groups find dead ground, use craters and obstacles for cover, and begin climbing through gaps where the firing is less concentrated. They move in short bursts, using smoke where available, pushing up draws and slopes that were supposed to be cleared faster. It is not a clean advance. It is a slow, forced movement under pressure, built from individual judgment rather than centralized command. Many officers and non-commissioned leaders are killed or wounded, and leadership passes to whoever can keep men moving. Across the invasion front, other beaches achieve better results, but no sector is effortless. Every landing faces confusion from tides, obstacles, and the chaos of moving through surf while carrying heavy loads. German artillery finds targets in clusters of men and vehicles. Radios fail or become unusable in water. Some units land with the wrong equipment or without their planned support. The Allied advantage is not that everything works as designed. It is that the force is large enough to absorb failure without stopping the entire operation. Back in England, Eisenhower receives reports that are partial and delayed. He is hearing about progress in pieces, with gaps filled by assumption. The worst moments for a commander are often the silent ones, when communications lag and the battlefield is still undecided. Eisenhower cannot take back the decision, and he cannot directly fix what is happening on any one beach. His role is now to keep the wider operation fed with reinforcements, supplies, and air cover, trusting that the men on the ground can hold long enough for mass to matter. Montgomery's strategy depends on building a secure lodgment quickly and then driving inland with speed. That requires steady momentum. The difficulty on Omaha threatens the timetable and forces adjustments. If the Americans cannot expand, the entire front becomes narrower, giving German defenders a simpler target. The invasion needs space, it needs ports, it needs roads, it needs to keep German armor from concentrating and counterattacking in strength. In the first day, every objective is fought for in fragments. Rommel's fears about Allied air power are proven correct. German daylight movement becomes costly, limiting the ability to shift forces fast. But German defenders still inflict severe casualties where their positions survive and their fire remains organized. At Omaha alone, American losses climb into the thousands, though the exact count is debated. The essential fact is clear. The beach is not won by routine execution. It is won by small units forcing their way forward under sustained fire. By nightfall, the invasion has not been thrown back. The Allies hold ground in Normandy, but it is uneven, fragile, and soaked in human cost. Eisenhower's decision has survived its most dangerous phase, yet nothing is secure. The next phase is whether the beachhead can expand before the Germans stabilize and strike back. What if Erwin Rommel concentrates his counterattack on Omaha before Eisenhower can land enough men and artillery to hold the line? Eisenhower does not celebrate on June 6th. The reports coming in are too uneven, the casualty lists too real, and the situation too unstable for triumph. In the first days after the landings, the Allied position in Normandy is still a narrow and dangerous foothold. Supplies must be pushed over open beaches. Artillery has to be landed and brought forward. Units must link up and secure roads. The enemy is still close enough to shell landing zones and attack exposed concentrations. The invasion has begun, but it has not yet succeeded in the way the plan demanded. This is the point where Eisenhower's role shifts from decision to endurance. The operational burden becomes continuous. Rotate forces, adjust objectives, reinforce weak points, and keep the flow of ammunition, fuel, and medical support moving across the channel. The German defense is damaged but not broken. The terrain favors defenders. Bocage, hedgerows, narrow lanes, and small villages create a battlefield where large formations fracture into short-range fights. Progress is measured in yards, not miles. What looked like a single decisive day becomes a prolonged grind. In these days, one document explains Eisenhower more than any public statement. It is the short message he drafted in advance to be used if the Normandy landings failed. He kept it in his pocket, and it places the responsibility where he believed it belonged. The meaning of that act is simple. He did not treat failure as something to be blamed on troops, weather, or luck. He prepared to place it on his own command decision. That message matters because it reveals the psychology of leadership under wartime pressure. Eisenhower understood that planning is never the same as control. He could build the coalition, balance competing egos, and make the final call. But he could not guarantee the landing craft would hit the right beach. He could not guarantee bombs would fall on the right bunker. He could not guarantee men would survive the first minutes of fire. What he could guarantee was accountability. That is why he wrote the note before he knew the outcome. Montgomery continues pushing to expand the bridgehead and maintain tempo. His focus remains on maintaining pressure and preventing the Germans from reforming coherent defensive lines. Eisenhower supports that need for momentum, but he also has to manage reality. Casualties, shortages, and the fog of war that slows any plan. A senior commander can demand speed, but speed requires functioning roads, intact units, and reliable supply. In Normandy, those conditions cannot be assumed. On the German side, Hitler's rigid command structure and delayed armored response did not stop the landings, but it does not end the German threat. As German units regroup, they fight for time and terrain. Their objective is not necessarily to drive the Allies back into the sea anymore. It is to contain them long enough to inflict maximum loss and prevent a breakout. The longer the Allies remain pinned near the coast, the harder it becomes to bring the full weight of American industry and manpower to bear on open ground. Rommel's warnings about the invasion's decisive early hours are proven in another way. The Allies survive, but they pay for every mistake and every delay. His defensive preparations do not save Germany, but they do make the cost of victory immediate and personal on the first day and beyond. Eisenhower's approval of the final D-Day order is often reduced to a single decision point, a commander saying go. The deeper truth is that the decision did not end the uncertainty. It created a new kind of uncertainty, one that could only be resolved by combat casualty and endurance over weeks and months. Eisenhower did not control what happened on Omaha or Utah or in the hedgerows inland. He controlled only the commitment to accept those consequences. That is what Eisenhower said when he approved the final D-Day order, even without speaking. He said the burden belonged to him, and he proved it with the message he prepared in case the invasion failed. In a war built on vast numbers and mechanized force, that quiet act remains one of the clearest signals of human responsibility at the highest level of command.